So why don't we take the amendment of the whole without objection, and to the amendment of the whole, Supervisor Sandoval.
Yeah, I've just got the legislation, I think like many of you, and I've read it, and from what I can see, it's very simple. It creates an advisory committee, and that's basically all it does. It creates an advisory committee that shall advise the Board of Supervisors, and that it consists of 5 voting members appointed by the board and so forth. But since I just got it, I wanted to ask the President if anyone disagrees with that point of view, and I'm sure that there are some of you who do disagree with that point of view, and through the President, again, I would welcome your point of view. Otherwise, it seems fairly straightforward, and I intend to vote for it.
Supervisor Sandoval, just to a point of information, Section 5.10 of the legislation actually sets forth a number of policies, and following that, the language on page 3 sets forth the Oversight Committee. But there are policy points on pages 1 and 2.
Well, Mr. President, if I may, the policies are not policies I can imagine that anyone would disagree with. I mean, there's value in restating them, but I appreciate your point of view. Thank you.
Supervisor Ellsworth.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through the President to Supervisor Sandoval, to specifically answer your question, I would point to line 3 on page 2. If we were to approve this document as amended, the zoo shall add no animals to the zoo unless the needs of all animals currently at the zoo have been met. How are you going to interpret that? If this had been in place 2 years ago, we would not have saved those 2 grizzly bears. I think I could certainly hear Supervisor Daly and certainly hear some people in the audience interpret this language to say all the needs of the animals at the zoo are not currently being served right now and haven't been for years, and to that point, we could never add any new animals. I think there are a lot of problems with these policies. That in and of itself, put that aside, do we really need another committee when we have what Supervisor Dufty and the mayor and others have worked out in terms of expanding the current committee? And in talking about oversight committees, I don't have the list in front of me. I had this with me last week. I'll wait till Supervisor Daly's done.
Supervisor Daly.
Yes, Mr. President, the intent of these amendments, and perhaps the city attorney can clarify that the intent of these amendments are to create the legislation that's currently in front of us creates a binding type of language or legalese when the next extension comes up in 4 years and however many months. This language now are policy statements that are putting the board on record, like we go on record through resolutions. The language in this is not intended to bind the future negotiations on zoo management. It's to create a committee to make recommendations to us that then I would like to see a future board go and attempt to negotiate in a future MOU. I mean, with that said, I'm not married to the policy language. This language was language that was largely worked up in committee and in discussions that some of the animal rights activists were having with members of the Zoological Society and our commission.
Supervisor Ellsworth.
Thank you, Supervisor Daly. More than happy for you to continue to explain how the language here really doesn't have a lot of import and won't really apply till the future. But beyond this language here, Supervisor Sandoval, what I was trying to explain before Supervisor Daly commented was that the level of regulation that is already in place, the level of advice that we already have at our disposal for these future negotiations is more than extensive. We have a Rec and Park Commission. We have a Joint Committee. We have an Animal Welfare Commission. We have the AZA. We have the USDA. We have state agencies. We have community groups. We have the Zoological Society. I don't think we truly need yet another committee to advise us in these negotiations. And I would strongly suggest, colleagues, that we vote this legislation down, move on, and allow the zoo to continue with the good work they have done. And a last point I'd like to mention, I appreciate Supervisor Daly singling me out for some work that I may have done in the week after Christmas. But truth be told, colleagues, let's be honest with one another. If this legislation had been in place a year ago, do we honestly believe what happened would not have happened? This legislation would not have prevented that horrible, horrific, tragic accident. To tie the two together, frankly, is beyond the pale and shouldn't be here in front of us today. Let's move on, send this away, and get on with the business of the city.
Supervisor Daly, and then why don't we vote
Just
on
quickly, I think if this legislation were adopted 7 years ago, it's quite possible that the events of last year wouldn't have happened, although I do agree with Supervisor Ellsburn that if we adopted this last year, it probably would have had no effect on the tragic events of Christmas. But 7 years ago, I think, may have been enough time for institutional change, to perhaps have prevented that. Certainly, the elephants situation would have been prevented. With that said, colleagues, let me just respond to the substantive point from Supervisor Ellsburn, which is that there are plenty that we can get information from. Colleagues, there's only one. There's only one body that reports to the Board of Supervisors that advises us on these types of matters, and that's the Commission, the Animal Welfare Commission. The legislation that's in front of us is based on a recommendation of that commission to us. And the advisory committee specifically focused on the zoo was their idea. So the commission that advises us on matters of animal welfare, colleagues, has come up with and recommended to us that we create a committee to help us and advise us specifically on zoo matters. I believe because they feel that within their larger area that they can't give the zoo the time and attention and focus that they believe the zoo needs, but not necessarily to put words in the mouth of our commissioners there. But this recommendation comes directly from that commission, colleagues.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Mercury, last words.
Just real quickly, I very much appreciate what Supervisor Ellsburn has said, but let us remember that leading up to, the Christmas tiger mauling, all these committees, for the most part, had already been in place, and they already been in position. The conditions of the zoo, any questions about the zoo's stability or volatility had already been in place, whether there had been a tiger mauling or not. That simply just spotlighted the problem that even much more. And Rec and Park Commission is really not subjected to our authority. They're one of two commissions whose decisions are not appealable to the Board of Supervisors. While I do agree that this is rather layered in bureaucracy through the whole system in itself, simply ignoring the idea that the Board of Supervisors or City Hall shouldn't have at least some role, or at least have, I think, more input in a formalized way, I don't think it's such a bad thing.
On the amendment of the whole, roll call, please.
Supervisor Mercury?
Aye.
Mercury, aye. Supervisor Peskin?
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Sandoval? Sandoval, aye. Supervisor Alioto-Pierre? Alioto-Pierre, no. Supervisor Amiano? Amiano, aye. Supervisor Chu? Chu, no. Supervisor Daly? Daly, aye. Supervisor Dufty? Dufty, no. Supervisor Ellsburn? Ellsburn, no. Supervisor Maxwell? Maxwell, no. Supervisor McGoldrick? McGoldrick, no. There are 4 ayes and 7 noes.
The measure fails.